a particularly egregious example where they tear down a statue that, it's like, you look at the statue, and even you can read, in most cases, like the plaques and stuff, it doesn't look offensive. Nothing about it appears objectionable. These are, for the most part, not statues showing like a plantation owner beating a slave or something.
They should enact more of these. I want one of these in every state. I don't know who got it worse, the horse or the Confederate soldier.
Removed a Confederate monument from the Jacksonville, Florida park earlier Wednesday.
Jacksonville mayor removes Confederate monument while the GOP official decries cancel culture. You're canceling the statue? My God. Do statues have emotions in the U.S.? Is that how that works? Do they have feelings? Was he like, God, this is 1984, I tells ya. George Orwell was right.
Morning after years of debate and controversy over its removal, Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan ordered the removal of the tribute to the women of the Southern Confederacy monument, which has stood north of downtown in Springfield Park since 1915. Deegan said the monument was a divisive presence that had no place in a city park.
I agree.
She's like, well, symbols matter. They tell the world that what we stand for and what we aspire to be. By removing the Confederate monument from Springfield Park, we signal a belief in our shared humanity, that we're all created equal, the same flesh and bones, the same blood running through our veins, the same heart and soul. A crowd gathered on the sidewalk erupted in cheers as crews took down two bronze statues, one of a woman in robes carrying a Confederate flag and the other of a woman reading to two children. In opponent to the removal, State Representative Dean Black blasted the move as a stunning abuse of power by Deegan. He said doing it without consulting city leaders or having a vote by the city council is another in a long line of woke Democrats' obsession with cancel culture and tearing down history. So once again, this was something that was done just like over at Arlington National Cemetery. I mean, they're doing this without any authority to do it. They're just taking it upon themselves to do it. Here's some photos. I just want you to see photos of them taking down the statue. So there's...
Oh my God, yeah, show us the pictures. It's so sad. Should I put on sad music?
There they are. I just want you to get a look at that statue.
Holy shit, yeah, just look at it. Just take a look. You know? They're erasing history in real time. Does this offend you? This just looks like a woman holding children and they look a little sad and apparently that statue had to go. It's not the greatest Confederate statue though, I'll grant you. Funny Confederate statue. It's the guy on the horse. Yeah, oh, this is my boy. This is my favorite. This is the only one that I'll be super upset if they ever take this one down. This one is so glorious. They should enact more of these. I want one of these in every state. I don't know who got it worse, the horse or the Confederate soldier. It's so glorious though. Please don't ever take this one down, America. All right, this is a part of your history. Okay, you have to cherish this.
Look how offensive that is. Look how gross and offensive and objectionable. I'm glad they got rid of that finally.
Apparently Nashville blocked the view of it. What? Well, at least they didn't take it down. They just don't want people to see it. The Metro Council voted Tuesday to ask the state of Tennessee to plant trees and vegetation to block the view of a controversial, privately owned Nathan Bedford Forrest statue on Interstate 65. The council, by voice vote, approved a resolution introduced at large Councilman Jerry Maynard as the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Davidson County delegation of the Tennessee General Assembly to take the necessary action to plant vegetation to block the view of the statue next to the interstate. How dare you, you monsters! Don't deprive us of the nation's history. As a Canadian, all right, I want to know that if I go to Tennessee, I should be able to find that monument, all right, and take photos with it and ride it.
Look at that. Just terrible. You know, a woman reading to a child, very offensive stuff. It's just gratuitous. You can't have that in a park. What will the children think? What will the children think if they look at that statue of a woman?
What a wild defense, though, because, yeah, a statue could be innocuous if you know nothing behind it. It's like, hey, by the way, I have a statue where all it's going to be is basically a hand feeding a dog. And then you're like, oh, that's a statue. It's just like a hand. Yeah, just a hand, and a hand is feeding a dog. The statue's up there. Isn't that a great statue? And then it's like, well, what does it represent? Oh, that's Hitler giving a cyanide pill to his own dog to test whether or not it would work before Hitler killed his own dog, before using the cyanide pills upon himself. So then why do we have a statue of that? That's horrible. Why would we have? Hey, it's just a hand feeding a dog. I mean, come on. Is that offensive to you? Do you think that's something that we should be taking down? I mean, come on. What is this cancel culture out of control here? Jesus.
When reading. Well, once again, you know what the children will think? They'll think nothing. Like they'll think, oh, that's a pretty statue.
I think that's kind of the point, Matt. And then the thing is, someone walks by and it's like, oh, that's a nice statue. What does it mean? Oh, well, funny dust. That's the statue put up by the Daughters of the Confederacy. Basically, after the Civil War of the United States, which was fought because one half of the country wanted the right to own slaves. So they became traitors and basically wanted to attack the U.S. and form their own nation. They lost. And then after losing, unfortunately, Abraham Lincoln didn't try them for crimes against humanity, and then they wanted to have appeasement, and then unfortunately he was assassinated. And so instead of the whole promise of 40 acres and a mule, instead what they started saying is they needed to basically allow for the southern states to revise their own history and tell a different story, and they've been doing that ever since. And a lot of that did include them saying that was not a battle over the right to own humans as property. That's not why they did it, all right? They were not fighting and dying for the right to own slaves. I mean, that's wild. Could you imagine how evil that sounds? Instead, they were very noble, and they basically wanted states' rights, and that's what the whole fight was about. And they want to just enact a bunch of statues all over the place, all over the South, everywhere, just so people can see the glory of the Confederacy and also teach it as part of a nation's history, if you will. And some of that might basically, ignite some disdain towards people of other colors. It might create, precursors to enacting things like segregation, Jim Crow laws, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's important that a nation revamps its own history when they shamefully lost a war that they were trying to fight in order to own people as property. So that's how that happened. It's just wild stuff.
It'll be no big deal to them unless you make it a big deal. I was thinking about this the other day, and because they say that, and this one is a particularly egregious example where they tear down a statue that, it's like, you look at the statue, and even you can read, in most cases, like the plaques and stuff. It doesn't look offensive. Nothing about it appears objectionable. These are, for the most part, not statues showing like a plantation owner beating a slave or something. That's not what these statues are. This one is a woman who's reading to her children.
That's kind of the point. Just in case anyone didn't know, Vox put a really good video together to explain this.
Listen to how this textbook describes slavery.
The master often had a barbecue or a picnic for his slaves. Then they had a great frolic. Even while working in the cotton fields, they sang songs. The beat of the music and the richness of their voices made work seem light.
Yikes, that's from History of Georgia, a textbook published in 1954 that was taught across junior high schools in Georgia for decades.
It's funny, that sounds like Ron DeSantis today. You might see that and be like, oh my God, that's horrifying. Yeah, that's some revisionist history, all right. Yeah, it was not that like that at all, actually. But Ron DeSantis today pretty much tries to tell it like that.
Of language is part of an intellectual movement called the Lost Cause, a distorted version of American Civil War history that's been prevalent in the South for a long time. It took shape soon after the defeat of the Confederate States in the war, when Southern historians like Edward Pollard and former Confederate General Jubal Early started preserving the South's perspective through their writings. They framed the Confederate cause as a heroic defense of the Southern way of life against the overwhelming forces in the North. That narrative has a few basic tenets: the glorification of Confederate soldiers who died for a cause they believed in, the belief that slavery was a benevolent institution, and maybe most importantly, that slavery was not the root cause of the war.
Now, the reason this is fucked up is because if you don't acknowledge things as being bad, awful, horrifying even, then you may be doomed to repeat it. Or it could have very, very racist ramifications that could actually impact people who were previously enslaved in the history of the United States, right? I always bring up, Germany post-World War II. I mean, it does really help that things like the Nuremberg trials existed in order to actually punish the Nazis and people who had committed crimes against humanity, but also just the idea of doing a mea culpa, as in not simply accepting that what happened is something afterwards that you should be able to do a revisionist history of and tell a new story of. You should actually look back and start to do forms of, hey, by the way, we should teach the real history, that what we did was horrifying, not we personally because it was our ancestors, but still not try and lie about it and do some kind of revisionist version of it, because if we do that, then people in the future might just think something is completely untrue, and then they're going to say things like enslaved people were happy, which is really fucked up to think or say.
The Lost Cause is one of the most notoriously effective efforts to rewrite history, and it was done by the losing side. So how did it become so deeply rooted in Southern memory? Blame the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The UDC was founded in Nashville in 1894 to preserve Confederate culture for generations to come. The women who made up the group descended from elite antebellum families, and they used their social and political clout to spread the pro-Southern version of the war as real history. You've probably seen their efforts to honor the Confederacy, but maybe you didn't know it was the UDC. They're the ones who covered the Southern landscape with memorials for Confederate leaders and soldiers. They used their fundraising and lobbying skills to pressure local governments into erecting monuments in prominent public spaces like courthouses and state capitals.
Installed here next to the state capitol by the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
The United Daughters of the Confederacy donated this memorial to the city back in the 30s.
They put them along roadsides and in parks, any place.
No, this is the exact opposite of, say, what happened in, like, if you travel to Berlin, you'll see monuments that have been erected in terms of trying to remind people of the horrors of the Holocaust. Like the Holocaust Memorial, for example, is a very haunting one. The way it's designed specifically, as you walk further into it, you start to descend deeper and deeper until you get almost this feeling of being lost and a very, very deep, profound feeling of hopelessness as you walk through it. When you're in the very, like, I would say, kind of centerpiece of it, it's really, really hard. It's almost disorienting to understand where you are. It's actually pretty well envisioned and designed in terms of like how can you represent something so horrifying like the Holocaust in terms of like having someone actually experience it by walking through it. Well, you don't literally experience the Holocaust, but you do experience the sense of complete hopelessness that comes from being within that monument. Apparently soldiers in Germany to this day have to go to these kind of monuments to learn about the history of Nazism, to learn about the history of fascism, in order to teach them about the evils of the world and the evils of even their own history in order to prevent it from ever occurring again. That's very different than, say, erecting monuments of heroism for Confederate soldiers, traitors to the United States, who effectively wanted to kill other humans for the right to own other humans as property. But if you do that for generations upon generations, like I gotta say, as a Canadian, it's always baffled me how there's still people who fly the Confederate flag and do so proudly. It's being like, oh, it's part of our history. And then people do it in Canada too. But I'm like, that is a racist ass flag. What the fuck are you doing brandishing that? Like, that's disgusting, you know? Like, would you do like the rising sun of Japan or a swastika? I know for white supremacists, like the Nequentes of the world, they'd be like, oh yeah. But like, you know, for people who don't know any better, it's just like, oh no, I just like the South. I just like Southern hospitality, Southern comfort. I just like Southern food. I like Southern music. That's why I do it. It has nothing to do with the fact that I think slavery is good, but it kind of does. I'm sorry. You can't separate one from the other.
That was remotely relevant to the Confederacy was memorialized. By the early 20th century, the UDC had 100,000 members in chapters spread all over the country, but mostly in former Confederate states. And there's a reason they grew so quickly during that time.
So we're talking about roughly 3 decades after the end.
When I was in 10th grade, my American history teacher said that if we wrote slavery was the cause of the Civil War, we would get the essay question wrong. What? This is in Georgia? I live in Georgia. Wow. That was in 2002. That's wild.
Of the war, and the Confederate veterans themselves are beginning to die off. So there is this push to find ways to commemorate it, because the big challenge by 1900 was there's a new generation of white Southerners being born, and they never experienced the war years.
That push is visible. Most of the Confederate monuments were erected during the UDC's height of influence.
There's a rhetoric around monuments that we want to get this thing built before all of that generation has died off, and the reason we want it is to teach future generations about those men.
Dr. Karen Cox wrote the book on the UDC, and I asked her if it was fair to say the group established the Lost Cause as historical fact in the South.
Oh my God, yeah. They were the leaders of the Lost Cause into the 20th century, and they made it a movement about vindication.
Just to give you an idea of how effective they were, they successfully lobbied for a Confederate memorial in Arlington National Cemetery, which U.S. President Woodrow Wilson proudly unveiled to a cheering crowd.
This is a weird account. Why didn't the people who didn't agree with slavery just move to Canada? Do they explain slavery in the Barbary era when the Ottoman Empire enslaved Croatians? So one thing you'll have to learn about slavery, hopefully at some point, I can't do a full, crash course on the history of it, but there's been different forms of slavery throughout history. And one of the most fucked up parts about chattel slavery specifically was that it was enslaving people based on the idea of race. That's what makes it unique. That there has been other forms of slavery and other people enslaved, and yes, even white people, or at least people with white skin, because the concept of white people didn't exist at the time, but people with white skin have been enslaved with people of darker skin throughout history, but it wasn't being done because they were considered to be part of an inferior race. That's the biggest difference, is that white people were not being selected and chosen as the inferior race that needs to be dominated upon by the superior race, such as those who have more melanin, which would have been a primary cause for a lot of the chattel slavery that was taking part in the United States and Canada as well, which is obviously incredibly fucked up. Like, just the sheer scale of the North Atlantic slave trade and the barbarism in the way human beings were literally treated like animals and mass tortured on an industrial scale, the likes of which have never been done on that level in human history, needs to be taught properly, or people are going to continue to try and use talking points like that, where they try and be like, well, I mean, there's been other forms of slavery. There absolutely has, but those other forms of slavery are different. I'm not saying that it makes it good. I'm not saying that indentured servitude or serfdom or enslaving people specifically as a usually in terms of the Ottoman Empire, it was done as a spoil of war. Right? Like if you had conquered another people, you could enslave people there as they were, again, now lower caste, but they weren't lower caste specifically because their skin was white, which is what, makes the North Atlantic slave trade unique in that way.
Now that's influence, right?
Monuments are the least of what they did.
What?
I mean, they are the most visible and tangible, but the work...
Indigenous people were sold into slavery as well, but it's a little known fact. Not only that, indigenous folk, per what I've read, were also very rebellious, and there was two reasons why that they started importing a large amount of black people to North America. One was the difficulty they were having mass enslaving indigenous bands and tribes, and the other was that indigenous people were dying in such high numbers from all the diseases that were being brought over, whereas black people who were being brought over from countries in Africa were more resilient to a lot of the diseases that the European colonizers had brought over, which is also, pretty fucked up.
with children was far more influential.
It turns out a central UDC objective is shaping how children think about the war and their Southern heritage. One of their most powerful tools? Textbooks. Take a look at this pamphlet called A Measuring Rod for Textbooks. It was written by the illustrious Southern historian Miss Mildred Rutherford, an educator, orator, and author of Southern history textbooks. She's also very pro-slavery. The pamphlet announced the formation of a textbook review committee featuring prominent Southerners like 5 former Confederate generals. This group was committed to spreading the truths of Confederate history, so they instructed school boards to reject any textbooks that did not accord full justice to the South. And they urged libraries to deface every book in their collection that didn't measure up by writing the words "unjust to the South" clearly on its cover. This pamphlet was shared widely with school boards throughout the South, and UDC-backed committees closely monitored history books to make sure Northern influence never reached classrooms. So the core language of an approved textbook aligned precisely with that of the Lost Cause. You know, stuff like,
"The Confederacy lost in the war between the states, but Georgia never forgot to honor her Confederate soldiers."
History of Georgia was on the UDC's approved list. It was also written by E. Merton Coulter, a self-described Southern historian and historian-described white supremacist.
They understand that how you educate, who wins the writing game, who wins the battle over history, ultimately wins the war. That's the big fight for the UDC.
But their work with children went further than the classrooms. The UDC formed an auxiliary group called the Children of the Confederacy, which was designed to get kids born in former Confederate states to actively participate in their version of history. Group leaders had kids recite call and response truths from something called the Confederate Catechism. Children up to the age of 18 would compete and be rewarded for memorizing long passages of Lost Cause rhetoric.
So it would be like an after-school thing, like that was your club. You would go after school to the meeting of the Children of the Confederacy, and your leader might teach you songs of the South like Dixie or other songs that were
Lance has no shame. Why are you trying to say one type of slavery is worse than the other? Well, I know you're trying to do the all slavery matters thing, which is also pretty strange. No, slavery is not great, but you should understand the causes of slavery and why different groups are enslaved, and history in general. That's like trying to say, like, hey, by the way, why should we learn any details about any single war or battle or struggle throughout human history? What a bizarre thing to do. And the idea that I think a lot of people like to bring up, like that other people have enslaved other groups throughout time and history, is to try and discount the horrors of chattel slavery or the horror. Like, why would you want to do revisionist history? I think all of this is deeply unfair to especially children in the South who are going to grow up being indoctrinated by these systems where they're like, hey, by the way, we want to teach you that this battle that we fought and lost wasn't done because of slavery. It was done because of states' rights, and that a lot of slaves were actually treated very well by their slave masters. And so we should teach this kind of history. That indoctrination to kids, I mean, they have no choice in the matter. They have to grow up in that school system. They're going to grow up and being instilled with racism. This is literally indoctrinating kids with racism. So they grow up thinking that they've got this false version of reality. You're doing the same thing just in regards to slavery, because, like, why discount the horrors that took place? Why discount indigenous genocide when other genocides have happened? Come on. Even if this genocide of indigenous people in North America was very, very large scale, tens of millions of people ended up being killed. But I mean, were they all killed by conquistadors? Weren't a lot of them killed by disease? Can you really blame the Europeans? They didn't know. They didn't understand what they were doing when they were bringing over all these diseases that ended up massacring tens of millions of people. And it's like, but we should teach the real history behind that, not to discount other forms of history. I think you should teach history of the Ottoman Empire. Of course you should. Why not teach all of it? I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn about those kind of things. I'm saying you shouldn't use them or weaponize them to dispel what other people learn or other parts of history. Don't use one as an excuse for the other. You're doing the exact same. Well, that's like the thing you're trying to call me out for is what you're doing. The horrors of the enslavement of the Ottoman Empire don't discount the horrors of the enslavement of chattel slavery or the uniqueness of the racism that was designed in order to justify chattel slavery. Why use that and be like, well, chattel slavery, sure, but what about when the Ottoman Empire was enslaving people who had white skin? It's like, were they enslaving people who had white skin specifically because they were white? Were they saying that white people were of an inferior race and the superior race happened to be this? Like, no, that's just not a part of the way their forms of enslavement worked. But yes, you should learn about their enslavement and the Ottoman Empire and the things that they did, every single part of it. I'm saying don't teach less history, teach more. Don't teach revisionist history, teach real history. It's very important that everyone learns every aspect of this.
Were considered Southern patriotic songs. They would have them write essays, go visit the veterans, and learn this catechism.
Children were also the centerpiece of their community's monument unveilings, like this living flag at the dedication of the Stonewall Jackson Monument in Richmond. Yes, those are school children. The UDC's efforts shaped the identities of children who grew up with the lost cause. They made history personal, and that made their story last longer.
Generations of children learning that narrative in a variety of ways grow up to be, segregationist in the 50s and 60s, because that's been drilled into them since they were children.
After World War I, the UDC started losing steam, but the damage was done. The monuments were in place, and the textbooks they wrote remained in Southern classrooms until the late 70s. And the women's group did it all without the right to vote or participate in politics.
You can still get glimmers of this lost cause memory of the war from people who will always choose to see it through the personal. And I think the UDC, to a great extent, was their goal.
So the next time someone says the Confederate monuments are about remembering our history, just know that that's exactly what the United Daughters of the Confederacy wants you to think.
Well, the United Daughters of the Confederacy and Matt Walsh. Someone pointed out that statue was taken down in 2023. This is a brand new video, so he's big mad about it today.
But today we see it promotes motherhood and family, literacy. And before you say that's ridiculous, you say, well, we can't come up with a new meaning for a statue. But this happens all the time. Look at what happened with the N-word. An actual racial slur was taken and turned into like this all-purpose word that appears 5 times per sentence in every rap song. It's even used as a...
He's comparing Confederate statues to the reappropriation of the N-word. That's so funny. Well, hey, clearly you're trying to reappropriate Confederate statues. Definitely the same thing.
Term of endearment. And say what you want about that. The point is just saying that, you know, a racial slur can become a greeting for the people who the slur was originally used against, and yet a statue of a woman reading to a child can't be interpreted or seen in any way beyond how...
Wow, I was doing a fucking bit. He's actually doing it. It's the same thing, apparently. Yeah. He's reappropriating the Confederate statues. So I don't know how this works. It seems very strange. Were the Confederate statues hurting you some way before? Were they promoting anti-white racism? Is that how you view it? And then you're trying to take it back and then reappropriate it? This doesn't work in any way.
It was allegedly intended when it was erected 100 years ago. And again, I'm not agreeing that it had a racist intention. I'm saying for the sake of argument. But here's the more important point. It's if the alleged intent behind the statue is what matters, more even than like the statue itself, then so does the intent behind removing it. And this has always been my argument all along. Or one of my arguments anyway. It's that no matter how you feel about these statues in a vacuum, what you have to remember is the intent, the people who are taking it down, why are they doing it? And what message are they trying to send?
Slavery's bad? I don't think it's too complex. Why have venerations of anything related to the Confederacy at all? I think that one's pretty easy.
You can claim that the statues were not intended to be unifying, but you removing the statue is also not intended to be unifying.
Well, to racists. But the thing is that, like, you know, Klansmen, white supremacists, Nazis, they aren't unifiers. That's not their point. And so, yeah, they might be upset, but I'm okay with that. Just in general, I think that their feelings should be heard, because what they believe and what they promote is antithetical to humanity. They're fundamentally evil people, deeply, deeply rotten and insecure, and they just want everyone to be miserable as they try to subjugate people they think are inferior. And it's usually coming from, you know, very bizarre looking people, right? Like this guy who looks like a septic brush personified is oftentimes the ones who will be there being like, what, we can't talk about the master race? What are we doing here?
None of this is about racial unity or healing or anything like that. And it never has been. This is part of a radical left-wing campaign to erase history and to rewrite it. I mean, that is the intention.
That's the other weird, like, I've seen that defense being used by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene for like Hitler statues and stuff. And it's like, do y'all spend all day learning history, walking around every single town looking for statues like Pokemon Go? Like, is that how you genuinely learn your history? Do most people? It's like, you're erasing a part of our history. How will kids ever learn? I don't know. A book? Like, what the fuck? Why do you need statues or icons or effigies to teach you moments in history? And if those effigies are like, slavery was good, actually, well, that's bad history then. Then maybe that shouldn't be taught. That should be taken down.
That's what they're trying to do. Which is why, if you're a smart person, even if you tend to feel yucky about these statues for whatever reason, you should still say, and even if, as I said all along, some of these individual statues, you might look at some of them individually in a vacuum and say, yeah, you know, for that particular one or this one, I can see an argument for taking it down. Even if you said that to yourself, you should still be smart enough to realize that, okay, yeah, I can see an argument in a vacuum, but we're not in a vacuum. And even if there's an argument for taking this particular statue down or that statue down, it should not be taken down like this. For this reason.
Why? Who gives a fuck? Fuck them all. Like, I don't understand. This was a nice one, though. It was wholesome. It was just like a mother holding her two kids. I like the way aesthetically it looked. Not this one. So apparently this was taken down in 2023, but he's still upset about it. Let's look it up. Jacksonville mayor removes Confederate monument. Jacksonville mayor removes Confederate monument. It was from 2023. Jesus Christ. Crews removed the Confederate monument from Jacksonville, Florida Park Wednesday morning following years of public controversy. The symbols matter. They tell the world who we stand for. Serious discussion of the monument's fate began in 2020 after Deacon's predecessor, Mayor Lenny Curry, ordered the removal of another monument, a bronze statue of a Confederate soldier that had been in downtown Park for more than 100 years. The move came after the death of George Floyd at the hand of Minneapolis police officers and on the heels of marches and other calls for social justice. A proposal to remove the Confederate women's tribute was introduced to the Jacksonville City Council, Republican-controlled board, never moved on it. Early this month, Jacksonville's Office of General Counsel determined the city council approval was unnecessary because city funds were not being used for work. As the city's top executive deacon, the Democrat, had authorized the order of the statue's removal. Blah, blah, blah. But what did it represent? The monument will remain enlarged. Here's begin Confederate Women of the Southland. Okay, let's look that up. Women of the Southland statue. Florida's tribute to women of the Confederacy. The widespread campaign was used to promote and justify Jim Crow laws in the South. That's, yep, all I needed to hear. Get rid of it. Okay, get rid of it. Smelt it, tear it down, get rid of it. Why the fuck does it need to be up there? Fuck Jim Crow laws, fuck fucking segregation, fuck all this bullshit. This is one of the problems. Like, so many people are always just like, wow, it's so amazing how like racist society still is, because we got so many fucking monuments to it all over the place.
So thank you so much to our patrons for making this show possible. We could not fund it without you. And if you want to join, please check out patreon.com/theserfs to unlock bonus episodes, uncensored content, and all the good stuff. Thanks to Anna Loves Riley, Addercap, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hegbard Salim, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet One 85, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Tigwick, and Words Greenwood.